upon the more and more rampant denial of people's rights and identity theft that's going on the Internet. And we bring in a former colleague of mine, State Senator Jeff Klein, chair of the Independent Caucus of Democratic Senators, and also a state senator himself from the Bronx. Jeff, good afternoon.
Hey, how are you, Governor? Happy New Year.
And a Happy New Year to you. And tell us about this piece of legislation, which I'm sure will be good news to John Gambling, who apparently was a victim of identity theft right here on WOR earlier this morning.
Well, I want to thank you, Governor, for your advocacy on this issue. This is a very important issue because, when we were kids, we had a known bully. Picked a fight, had a fight in the schoolyard once or twice, and usually made up and became friends. Now you have what appears to be invisible packs of bullies that are relentless. And they're using the Internet and they're using other social media as a weapon. And it's very, very serious, which led me to release a report about 3 months ago talking about the problem of cyberbullying here in New York State. And we introduced a package of comprehensive legislation which would now add cyberbullying to our stalking laws and our aggravated harassment laws. And also, if indeed someone does cyberbully another, it could be eligible for one of our hate crimes or bias crime laws in New York State.
Well, do you think that the electronic media is being utilized more for crimes, or is it just that people who are leaning that way have figured out the system and are becoming more and more sophisticated at appropriating other people's property?
Well, we are in the digital age, and the Internet, serves a tremendous and very important service, especially an educational one. But there's always going to be those who use it in a negative way, and in this case, a very deadly way. So I think we need to have laws on the books to respond in kind. The schoolyard bully of yesteryear is now the cyberbully of the digital age, and I think our laws have to, keep up with the times, so to speak.
Speaking of the schoolyard bullies of yesteryear, undoubtedly you're aware of that 2 days after Christmas, a young woman stepped in front of a bus and had a suicide note, and that has now been resolved by the New York City Police Department as not compliant with what would be a suicide caused by bullying. However, we passed the Dignity for All Students
Correct.
Act back in September of 2010, and part of the legislation basically says that if there's evidence of bullying, that could be what would take a vulnerable person and push them over the top, because the victim of bullies is usually not the cheerleader of the football team or the quarterback. It's somebody who has issues of their own, or is an unhappy person, or a person that dresses differently, or in some way is vulnerable to this type of action.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, here's my question. Obviously, you don't know the facts of the case, but do you think that the police department's investigation would have been a little different if the Dignity for All Students Act, which goes into effect in July of 2012, were in effect right now?
Well, I know that was done under your watch, and you fought for that for many years, and I thank you for that, Governor. And I believe, first, let me just say that any teenager committing suicide for any reason is a horrible tragedy, and my heart goes out to the Cummings family.
Absolutely.
And I think, we really, regardless, have to be, clear that, if you're someone who has some problems and you're cyberbullied, that's the vulnerable person. That's the person that is most likely to take one's life. And, it goes to, our basic criminal law system. You take your victims as you see them. And I think that's something that's, very, very important. And again, I think, by passing this legislation, Governor, I want to give prosecutors around the state of New York another tool to be able to, correct this problem. And I think, when we pass penal laws and we pass laws that have a criminal impact, there's always a chilling effect. And I think if people know that they're going to be punished with a crime, they just don't do it. And I think that's the message we have to send to these young people who are taking one another's lives.
What I think will be especially effective about the legislation you propose, should your colleagues see it the way you and I do and pass this legislation, is that unlike what goes on in the schoolyard, which becomes, one person's word against another's, or different people come in and stick up for their friends, and you never really know what the truth is. Cyberbullying is readily identifiable. It's in writing.
Exactly.
And all you have to do is save the emails, and you've got a pretty good case.
Yes.
So cyberbullying, in a lot of ways, may help to do exactly what you just said, which is to help prosecutors or even school authorities determine what went on in a schoolyard where the regular bullying occurs, because the cyberbullying may be preamble to it.
Right. I think the Dignity for All Students Act is fantastic. Education has to be a component in all this to prevent bullying. But I think at the same time, you have to get serious about punishing those who are using words that in some cases can kill. We've had so many examples. Governor, I've been speaking, in schools all over the city, all over the state, and I hear stories constantly about Internet websites that are being set up where there's 500 followers taunting one girl each and every day. It happens time and time again. And I think, some, are strong, and they're going to move on and be able to, deal with it. But there's many young people that aren't capable of doing that. And I think, those are the people we have to try to protect. And I think we really have to get serious. I don't want to see, more lives lost because of the problem of cyberbullying. And that's why also we kicked off a month ago the first ever cyberbullying census. It's www.newyorkcyberbullycensus.com. We're asking young people to fill out our survey. It's totally anonymous, and we really want to get their input. First, we want to learn how young people are feeling about cyberbullying, and I think, the education component is we want them to help us craft this law, see if we have any changes in the existing law that I introduced. And I think so far we've gotten close to 3,000 hits. And we're hopeful that before we announce it, we're going to get 10,000 respondents. And I think it'll give us a clear snapshot of how serious this problem is in New York State, because, Governor, we have no idea. We have no stats. We don't know how serious this problem is, and I think this is going to be another important tool to build grassroots support to pass my legislation.
By the way, Senator, is there a section there where legislators can fill out the forms anonymously? Because I remember when I was there that the Speaker publicly accused me of bullying him into a decision that he made, and I never thought the Speaker could be pushed by anyone. I thought it was the highest compliment I ever got.
Well, I'll make an exception for you. You have to be a former governor and a former state senator to fill out the survey.
Okay, absolutely. So now it's a new legislative year. One of the real issues and problems that states are going to have to deal with is the issue of pension returns. With pension costs going up between 2009 and eventually to 2015 by 185%, the question is not whether or not people worked hard enough for their pensions, because they did, but whether or not we have the money to pay them, which we don't. And this has gone on in a number of other states. One county in Alabama stopped paying pensions altogether back in December of 2010. And how do you see this working out? Obviously, the unions are going to be very upset, and the unions have been, in the last couple of years, quite cooperative, basically signing on to zero increases in salary for 3 years. But then again, our financial situation is so dire that even with that agreement, we're going to have trouble paying the pensions that people work for in the next few years.
Well, Governor, when you were governor, you put together and passed the most comprehensive pension reform in a Tier 5. That's going to save us money over the long term. We really have not, adequately measured the impact of that reform, and here we are looking at a new reform in the legislation that we're going to be looking at as Tier 6. I have to take a good hard look at it. I think, one of the things we have to be cognizant of that people are attracted to public service, good, hard-working people, because of a pension. And, our pension plan in New York State, I think is, doing very, very well as far as our investments are concerned. I think one of the things we need to do, besides constantly changing the public pension structure, is to see how we can get the private sector involved in a pension plan. I think that's part of the problem. I think, you have people in the private sector who have a 401k plan that's tanked over the last couple of years, and they're now pointing fingers at those in the public sector saying, well, I don't have something, why do you have it? I think instead of playing the private sector against the public sector, let's see how we can help the private sector and take a good hard look on whether or not a new tier in the form of Tier 6 is warranted.
Yeah, the Tier 5 that we passed in 2009 was the first reform in that area in 26 years.
Yeah, right.
So we're coming back within 3 years. We'll have to test to see how it works. One of the problems, no matter which way you want to do it, is because we pretty much have frozen state service right now, there are no new people to come in under the new plan.
Right.
We're living under the old one continuously. So we're going to have to find some better ways. Well, Senator Klein, I'm really glad that you reached out to us to talk about this bill, because we were about to reach out to you because I wanted to ask you the question about the implementation of the Dignity for All Students Act. But by adding electronic types of harassment to the legislation, if it passes, it's going to protect a lot of people. And so to you and Assemblyman Scarborough, who's sponsoring it in the Assembly, and to the other co-sponsors that you've got, thanks very much for, I think, giving the public a choice. Hopefully your colleagues will heed the call.
Well, I'm hopeful, and I know with your help we can do that, Governor. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks very much. That was Senator Jeff Klein.